We first meet Iris at the beginning of the film, who is grieving for her deceased son, Mato. She has only one toy boat left as a memento of him, while her husband is sleeping. She takes the car to calm herself and drive to the mountain. She hikes to a place full of memories, where her son's memorial is located. She highlights the initials carved into a tree. Memories lead her to the abyss of despair, where she is overcome with negative thoughts and considers taking her own life in order to join her son at the spot where he fell. Richard seems to be trying to use his story to soften Iris's decision. Richard has gone through a lot of trauma in the past, especially related to a car accident that killed his girlfriend Chloe. He ended up in the hospital and was unable to move for 2.5 months. Iris also tells him about her son, whom she left to play alone, which led to his tragic fate. The two of them connect emotionally, but also share a sense of brokenness. Their meeting has a profound impact, with Richard trying to convince Iris that even in the midst of despair, life can still contain beauty. As they say goodbye, they appear to find brief solace, but as he is leaving, Richard realizes that Iris has changed her mind, and they walk together to the car. When it's time for them to part ways, Richard has parked next to her. However, it appears like Richard has blocked her door, stopping her from getting into her car. He leaves his car with an umbrella that he uses as a taser. Richard takes her and ties her up in his car. After being abducted by a stranger, Iris wakes up in a car with them. Her wrists are bound, and she tries to use her smartwatch, but Richard tells her there isn't an emergency SOS and returns her toy boat. Iris removes a knife from her pocket, gradually frees herself from Richard's hold, and then diverts his attention while he's driving, leading the vehicle to collide with a tree. Richard reveals his secret that Iris has just 20 minutes left before her body starts to shut down, leaving her completely paralyzed and unable to speak. They start fighting in the car, and both of them fall to the ground. Iris chooses to flee, which speeds up the effects of the injection as she does so. Iris quickly discovers she is losing her physical abilities as Richard follows her. Time is running out, and Iris can no longer walk, so she seeks a place to hide. She sets a timer for 20 minutes, after which she descends, making each step harder as Richard casually follows. Richard loses her trail and hovers directly above her, while searching ants assault her face, causing her to scream. Then she tosses herself into the water, giving in to the waves, and the water pushes her toward a tree. She then uses her arms to get to the surface because her legs have failed her, and she is lying on the grass with her remaining time running out. She can see and hear everything around her, but she is unable to move. She closes her eyes as the machine approaches, but he stops. We meet Bill, who tries to help but notices that her iris is unresponsive, so he turns her and moves his finger in front of her to see if she can see it or hear. She confirms it with a blink of her eyes. A second goes by before Bill takes her home with him, 1 blink for yes and 2 for no. Bill answers the door when someone knocks, and Iris blinks quickly multiple times, revealing Richard, who says he was in a vehicle accident and is trying to find his wife. Richard pretends to be ill while Bill instructs him to wait and walks inside to retrieve his phone. Richard requests the phone because he says he misplaced his bill and wants to assist but is cautious. In an attempt to win Bill's trust and learn where Iris is, Richard inquires as to whether he has a wife. Bill replies that his wife passed away from a heart attack and acknowledges that he hasn't been entirely truthful with him. However, Richard lied about misplacing his phone, so when the phone rings, Bill doesn't answer. Bill improvises that he has placed Iris in a shed outside. When Richard gets close, he is pushed beneath the bookshelf. Bill calls for assistance, which results in a struggle in which he maintains control. While on the floor, Richard finds a knife and attacks Bill, stabbing him in the leg and then the stomach, leaving him for dead. When he checks the shed and discovers that Iris is not there, he decides to burn the entire place. Iris remains positioned behind the sofa couch. Now that she can only move her finger and not her body, Richard is getting ready to set a fire, spilling gasoline all over the place. This is the signal Iris makes with her finger, and he sees blood beneath the bed, realizes she is hidden there, lights a fire, and drives away. Just as he starts the engine, he changes his mind and returns for her, putting her next to him as he drives. His daughter calls him to tell him that she wanted to visit him with her mother tomorrow to celebrate her good grades. Since he's running low on gas, Richard is forced to accept their visit after his wife verifies that he needs to talk to her. He pulls over at a gas station, puts on his sunglasses, and leaves Iris alone in the car. She looks around and notices a few people trying to move and pushing her hand against the seatbelt to get out of it. She moves to the side of the car near the window, and a child approaches her, reminding her of her son. His mother comes and takes him away, and Richard quickly returns, bucking her seatbelt. He then returns to his car from earlier, gathers equipment for later, and conceals it under his shirt in the car. After that, he gets a wire to attach to his car, and a police officer knocks on the window, and Iris still cannot speak. Richard hears him and stands up. The officer says he wants to talk to Iris and is looking for this truck. Richard tells him she is intoxicated, but his driver's license has expired. He then starts to tell a story about how his wife was driving while intoxicated, crashed into a tree, and was left alone. The officer asks Richard where he got the injury on his head, but he is unable to answer. When Iris succeeds in opening the window, the officer notices and becomes interested in learning more about her. Richard makes up a story about her abandoning him after they lost their kid Mato. He then goes back to Iris, who helps him by whispering, and the officer notices what Richard is attacking underneath the blouse. Richard uses a wire to attack him and kills him. And then he finds himself back in his gasoline-soaked car. At this point, we see that the injection is gone because Iris had moved it closer to her during the drive, and she talks about how he was confined to a bed for 2 months, which drove him insane because he claims to have found clarity during that time. He thanked her after his girlfriend passed away. Iris tries to play on his emotions by stating that he could lose his wife and daughter if he keeps doing what he is doing, so he changed his plan and now wants to drown her as he's running out of time. In a last-ditch effort, Iris takes the injection and stabs his leg, but she is not strong enough to do it correctly. She screams as Richard takes it from her and uses it to empty it. Then he gets a knife and the necessary supplies, takes her to a boat, and gets her ready for the final destination. Iris starts sobbing loudly to get his attention, and then she asks for one item to remove the metal boat from her pocket. Richard chooses to do so, drops the knife, which lands on the side of his face, and then draws a gun, but Iris shifts the boat, knocking the gun down and leaving him end up into the water. Iris takes the gun and shoots him, but she also hits the boat, which sinks, and she still loses control of her body, drowning with the boat. A few moments later, she emerges from the water and swims to safety. But on the other side, she spots Richard, who has swum to shore and has recovered enough strength to go toward him. Her final words are "thank you," which are the same words he said to his girlfriend when she passed away, leaving him there helpless to bleed out. Both characters' experiences of loss are intertwined and shape their interactions. Richard has gone through a lot of hardship in the past, especially related to a terrible vehicle accident when he lost a significant other. In his first attempts to distance himself from Iris, Chloe suggests that he prefers alone because of his loss. His uneasiness suggests that he struggles with vulnerability. His difficulties imply that he fights with resentment toward himself and perhaps the world for having lost Chloe and his sense of self. But Iris seems to show sincere concern for Richard's emotional state. She feels stuck in her pain and seems reluctant to share too much of what she knows about what a complication that might speak to Richard. Iris is suggested by brokenness. She appears to be at a breaking point, unable to cry and experiencing both bodily and emotional paralysis. During a disastrous family outing, Iris talks about the death of her son Mato. Her grief shows itself as a harsh reality in which she battles thoughts of numbness and an overwhelming want to disappear. Iris becomes a captive of the stranger who reveals his intent, which is to absorb her trauma as a reflection of his own. He gives her a drug that paralyzes her, symbolizing how her grief has paralyzed her life. The film ends with a struggle for understanding as well as survival, as Richard loses control and divulges more about his past traumas. He eventually forms a distorted bond with Iris, who prevails in a battle of the mind by using suggestive speech to cause his thoughts to wander and test his judgment when he discusses the significance of his wife and daughter.